Imagine your quiet suburban street erupts into a battle of wills. An undercover federal agent, a critical mission hanging by a thread, faces an HOA president wielding absolute power. A seemingly harmless Jeep becomes the flashpoint for a conflict that will expose hidden truths. You won't believe what happens when suburban tyranny collides with federal law. Don't miss what unfolds next. It's a complete blight on the neighborhood's aesthetic, Linda Greaves declared, her voice a shrill, self-righteous pronouncement that carried effortlessly across manicured lawns. She stood like a queen on her perfectly edged sidewalk, a clipboard clutched in one hand, a pen poised like a scepter in the other, surveying the offending vehicle with an expression of profound disgust. The offending vehicle, in this case, was a rugged, dark green Jeep Wrangler, currently parked in the driveway of 142 Elmwood Lane, Detective Ryan Keller's temporary suburban fortress. It wasn't just any Jeep, it was a critical piece of operational equipment, a mobile command center in disguise, brimming with cutting-edge surveillance gear. Its presence, however, offended Linda Greaves' meticulously curated vision of suburban perfection. Ryan, a member of a federal task force investigating a sophisticated financial fraud ring that conveniently, or rather inconveniently, operated within the very fabric of this pristine community, including, disturbingly, elements within the homeowners association itself had chosen the Jeep for its robust, unassuming appearance. It blended in just enough with the scattered pickup trucks and SUVs of a typical American suburb, yet its subtle modifications allowed it to house the intricate network of antenna, receivers, and data processors essential for his covert operation. Parking it in his driveway was a calculated risk, a necessary evil to keep the sensitive equipment powered and ready for rapid deployment without drawing undue attention. The garage, a place for overt storage, was already filled with other, less conspicuous tools of his trade. He had believed the modest, almost rustic appearance of the Jeep would be overlooked, a minor anomaly in a sea of bland sedans and family crossovers. He had underestimated Linda Greaves' zeal for order and her absolute conviction in her own infallible judgment. The initial complaint had arrived 2 days prior, a terse, unsigned notice taped to his front door, citing a violation of Article 7, Section 3B, Vehicle Aesthetics and Parking Regulations. Specifically, it referenced non-conforming vehicle color and oversized wheel dimensions. Ryan had scoffed, dismissing it as a minor bureaucratic nuisance from a notoriously overzealous HOA. He was a federal agent, engaged in a high-stakes investigation that could dismantle a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme and potentially send several influential figures, possibly including some HOA board members, to federal prison. A trivial parking dispute was the least of his concerns. He had simply peeled off the notice, crumpled it, and tossed it into the recycling bin, his mind already consumed by wiretaps and financial ledgers. He had miscalculated. Linda Greaves did not issue warnings, she issued decrees. Her belief in her own authority was absolute, unyielding, and utterly devoid of nuance or empathy. To her, rules were not guidelines, they were divine commandments, and any perceived transgression was a personal affront. She saw herself as the vigilant guardian of neighborhood harmony, a self-appointed aesthetic enforcer with the power to dictate everything from shrub height to mailbox design. The Jeep, with its utilitarian, dark green and slightly larger tires necessary for traction in various terrains, not for suburban off-roading, was a glaring imperfection in her perfectly painted tableau. It screamed nonconformist, and nonconformity was the ultimate sin in Linda Greaves' meticulously controlled dominion. This morning, the situation escalated from a petty dispute to a full-blown crisis. Ryan had been inside, monitoring a particularly sensitive data stream, when the distinct metallic clang of a chain being applied to his Jeep's chassis echoed through the quiet street. He sprinted to the window, his heart thudding with a sudden, icy dread. There she was, Linda Greaves, her face a mask of triumphant resolve, directing a bewildered tow truck operator. Her eyes gleamed with a self-satisfied malice as she pointed to the lock on his garage door. which he had secured just that morning. "Cut it," she commanded, her voice ringing with indisputable authority. "The vehicle is being impounded. It's a clear violation. And if he doesn't move it, the garage is next." The tow truck operator, a burly man named Gus with a worn cap pulled low over his eyes, hesitated. "Ma'am, I usually get a formal request from the owner, or at least city parking enforcement. This seems irregular." "Irregular," Linda scoffed, puffing out her chest. "I am the president of the Homeowners Association. I am the authority here. This man has repeatedly ignored our regulations. His monstrous vehicle is an eyesore. It devalues our property. Cut the lock. Now!" Ryan burst through his front door, a surge of controlled fury threatening to overwhelm his usual composure. He saw Gus, pliers in hand, nervously approaching the padlock on his garage. "Hold it right there," Ryan bellowed, his voice sharp and authoritative, cutting through the morning stillness. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Linda whirled around, her triumphant expression curdling into a sneer. "Ah, the delinquent owner finally emerges. Don't worry, Mr. Keller, your precious ugly truck is about to find a new home, one far from our pristine community. This isn't my precious ugly truck. Mrs. Greaves, this is federal property. You lay one finger on that vehicle, and you'll be interfering with a federal investigation. That's a felony." Ryan's voice was low, laced with a dangerous edge. He couldn't reveal the true nature of his operation, but he had to protect the vehicle and the sensitive equipment within. The thought of the tow truck damaging the highly calibrated sensors, or worse, someone accessing the data, sent a chill down his spine. The sheer audacity of her actions, coupled with the critical nature of his current mission, made his blood boil. He glanced around, desperately hoping his backup had arrived. Just then, a sleek, unmarked black sedan pulled up sharply behind the tow truck. Officers Nathan Chen, Officer Ramirez, and Officer Bowen, a trio of plainclothes officers assigned to discreetly secure the perimeter during this sensitive phase of the investigation, emerged, their expressions grim. Captain Julia Tran, Ryan's direct superior, was monitoring from a distance, but she had already been alerted to Linda's erratic behavior earlier that week. Now, it seemed, the situation had exploded. "Mrs. Greaves, we've received reports of a disturbance," Officer Chen stated calmly. Stepping forward, his eyes subtly scanning the scene. "Is there a problem here?" Linda, momentarily taken aback by the sudden appearance of uniformed officers, quickly regained her composure. "Problem, officer. The problem is this man's flagrant disregard for our community's rules. I am simply exercising my authority as HOA president to ensure compliance. This vehicle is a hazard and an aesthetic violation." She gestured wildly at the Jeep. "I'm ordering it towed." "You're ordering federal property to be towed," Ryan retorted, stepping closer, his jaw tight. "Do you have any idea the implications of that?" Officer Ramirez, seeing the escalating tension, subtly positioned himself between Ryan and Linda. "Ma'am, towing a vehicle parked on private property usually requires a formal complaint, proof of violation, and sufficient notice. Has that protocol been followed?" "Notice was given," Linda snapped, waving her clipboard. He ignored it. "And as for proof, look at it. It's an abomination. This man is a menace to our property values. And as HOA president, I have the right to enforce our covenants." She puffed up, her eyes gleaming with self-importance, oblivious to the subtle glances exchanged between the officers. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement radiating from her was almost palpable. Ryan realized, with a sinking feeling, that reason was not a language Linda Greaves understood. Meanwhile, a few houses down, a neighbor named Dan Harper, a tech-savvy freelancer who rarely missed local drama, had heard the commotion. He emerged from his garage, smartphone in hand, and began recording. He'd seen Linda's antics before, but this, with the tow truck and the sudden appearance of officers, felt different. He zoomed in, capturing every word, every gesture, every escalating moment of the bizarre confrontation. He had no idea he was about to record a video that would expose far more than just an HOA power trip. The air crackled with a palpable tension, each word a hammer blow against the fragile peace of the suburban morning. Ryan, struggling to maintain his composure, felt the delicate threads of his undercover operation unraveling with terrifying speed. Every minute, the Jeep remained exposed. Every second, Linda Greaves continued her theatrical tirade, increased the risk to the sensitive intelligence it housed. More importantly, it jeopardized the entire investigation, which was meticulously building a case against powerful figures, some of whom were, ironically, part of this very HOA. He shot a quick, almost imperceptible glance at Officer Chen, a silent plea for immediate intervention. Chen, a seasoned veteran, picked up on the cue, his gaze hardening as he assessed the situation. "Mrs. Greaves," Chen interjected, his voice firm but measured, "we understand your concerns regarding community standards. However, damaging or attempting to seize property without proper legal authorization, especially if it's potentially subject to federal jurisdiction, can lead to serious legal repercussions. We need to ascertain the full context before any action is taken." He stepped a little closer to Linda, subtly creating a barrier between her and the tow truck operator, Gus, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Linda, however, was impervious to reason, fueled by an almost manic conviction. "Legal authorization. I am the legal authorization in this community. The covenants grant me the power to preserve property values and enforce standards. This man is defying me. He's defying the entire association." She pointed a trembling finger at Ryan. "And I don't care what he says about federal property. That's a flimsy excuse for an eyesore." Her voice rose to an indignant shriek, drawing the attention of other curious neighbors peeking from behind curtains. This was precisely the kind of overt spectacle Ryan had painstakingly avoided for weeks. Ryan knew he couldn't afford a prolonged standoff. Every second that vital equipment was outside his secure garage increased the vulnerability of the entire network. The thought of a civilian, or worse, a confederate of the financial criminals he was investigating, casually walking by and noticing a specific antenna or a misaligned sensor, sent a jolt of ice through him. The meticulous planning, the sleepless nights spent decrypting data, the countless hours of surveillance, all of it could be undone by Linda Greaves' unbridled arrogance. He had to act, and fast, but without blowing his cover entirely. He had to be Ryan Keller, the annoyed homeowner, not Detective Keller, the federal agent. "Mrs. Greaves, you are making a grave mistake," Ryan said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "This is beyond a simple HOA dispute. You are crossing a line you cannot uncross." He subtly angled his body, shielding the Jeep's more sensitive components from immediate view. Even as he spoke, "I have informed you this is federal property. If you proceed, you will be held personally accountable." It was a bluff, a calculated risk to intimidate her, but the tremor in his voice was genuine. The stakes were too high. Gus, the tow truck operator, looked from Linda to Ryan, then to the officers, his brow furrowed with apprehension. "Look, ma'am, I'm just here to do a job. If there's a dispute, especially with federal property involved, I can't just tow it. I'm liable for damages, and frankly, I don't want to get involved in a federal case." He gestured helplessly. "My contract doesn't cover this." "Your contract covers following my instructions," Linda shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red. "You signed an agreement with the HOA. You will tow this vehicle now." She advanced on Gus, her eyes blazing with an almost unhinged fury. The level of her self-righteousness was staggering. She truly believed she was above all law, all common sense. Officer Ramirez stepped in, placing a calming hand on Gus's arm. "Sir, we advise you to hold off. This is clearly a developing situation with significant implications. You could be implicated in obstruction." "Obstruction!" Linda screeched, her gaze snapping back to Ramirez. "You're obstructing me. You're obstructing the legitimate authority of this homeowners association. I'll have all your badges. I'll call the mayor. I'll call the governor. You have no idea who you're dealing with." She brandished her clipboard like a weapon, her voice rising in pitch with each accusation. Her performance was so over the top it bordered on caricature. Yet the danger it posed was acutely real. Ryan felt a wave of icy dread wash over him. This was rapidly spiraling out of control. He couldn't risk a full-blown confrontation, not with his mission so precariously balanced. He needed Captain Tran to intervene, but he also needed to buy time. He glanced at Dan Harper, who was still recording, a slight smirk on his face. The video would be damning for Linda, but it wouldn't save his operation if the Jeep was compromised. "Mrs. Greaves, let's be reasonable," Ryan began, trying a different tack, a calmer, more pleading tone, anything to de-escalate. "This isn't about the Jeep. We can talk about the rules later. Right now, you are interfering with something far larger than you can comprehend. Please, just stand down." His words, meant to pacify, only seemed to enrage Linda further. "Reasonable? You want to be reasonable after flaunting our rules for weeks, after insulting our community with that hideous machine? No, this is about principle. This is about upholding the very foundation of our beautiful neighborhood. You, sir, are a lawbreaker." She pointed at the Jeep with an almost evangelical fervor. "And that vehicle is a symbol of your defiance." Just as Linda began to wind up for another scathing monologue, Ryan's comms device, discreetly hidden in his pocket, vibrated. It was Captain Tran. "Keller, status report. What's happening?" Her voice was low, urgent, laced with concern. "Captain, we have a civilian obstruction. HOA president. She's attempting to have the asset towed." Ryan whispered into the hidden mic, his voice strained. "She's escalating rapidly. Officers Chen, Ramirez, and Bowen are on scene, trying to de-escalate. But she's unhinged. She's threatening them with repercussions if they don't comply." A pause. Then Tran's voice, sharp and decisive. "Understood. Maintain cover. Do not compromise the asset. I'm en route. I'll initiate direct contact with local authorities in the HOA board. Chen, Ramirez, Bowen, establish a perimeter. Do not allow anyone near that vehicle. I repeat, no one." Officer Chen, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, immediately relayed the command to his fellow officers. They moved with practiced precision, forming a loose but effective cordon around the Jeep, subtly blocking Linda's direct access to it. Their faces became less accommodating, their posture more rigid. This was no longer a simple domestic dispute. Linda, seeing the officer's shift in demeanor, gasped dramatically. "What is this? Are you threatening me? Are you siding with this scofflaw against the legitimate authority of the Homeowners Association? This is outrageous. I pay your salaries. Ma'am, we are securing the scene for your safety and for the integrity of an ongoing investigation," Officer Bowen stated calmly, his hands subtly resting on his holstered weapon. "We advise you to step back." This overt display of authority seemed to momentarily stun Linda. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her eyes darting between Ryan, the officers, and the now static tow truck. The shock was evident, a flicker of genuine fear in her usually imperious gaze. This was a response she hadn't anticipated. She was used to commanding, not being commanded. As the standoff intensified, Dan Harper, the neighbor, zoomed in closer with his phone, his heart pounding with excitement. This was better than any reality TV show. He captured Linda's indignant spluttering, Ryan's steely resolve, and the officer's calm, unwavering posture. He knew, instinctively, that this footage was gold. He silently congratulated himself for being in the right place at the right time. He had a feeling this video was going to go viral, and he was right. Suddenly, a sleek, dark SUV with tinted windows screeched to a halt a few yards away. The rear door opened, and Captain Julia Tran emerged, her presence immediately commanding attention. She was a woman in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in a sharp blazer, her expression unreadable but radiating an undeniable authority. She walked with a confident stride, her eyes fixed on Linda Greaves. "Mrs. Greaves, I understand there's a misunderstanding here. Captain Tran stated, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of command. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut through the chaotic din like a surgeon's scalpel. I am Captain Julia Tran, and this vehicle belongs to a federal task force. It is critical to an ongoing investigation into financial fraud within this very community. Linda's jaw dropped. The word federal hung in the air, a stark, unwelcome reality crashing down on her carefully constructed world of petty rules and absolute power. Her eyes widened, a dawning horror replacing her self-righteous fury. The truth, blunt and undeniable, had just been laid bare. The revelation hung heavy in the crisp morning air, a cold, hard truth that shattered Linda Greaves' meticulously constructed facade of unassailable authority. Her bluster evaporated, replaced by a ghastly pallor and a sudden, involuntary tremor. The word federal, spoken with such calm authority by Captain Tran, resonated with a far greater weight than all of Linda's shrill pronouncements combined. She looked at Ryan, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning terror, suddenly seeing not a rebellious homeowner, but a formidable adversary cloaked in suburban anonymity. The sheer audacity of her actions, previously fueled by a misplaced sense of entitlement, now seemed monstrously reckless. Captain Tran stepped forward, her gaze unwavering, her voice devoid of emotion, yet brimming with implicit threat. Mrs. Greaves, your actions constitute obstruction of a federal investigation. That is a serious felony, carrying significant penalties. Furthermore, we are investigating allegations of financial misconduct within the homeowners association itself. Your aggressive attempts to seize and potentially damage this vehicle, which contains sensitive evidence, will now be viewed through a very specific lens. Tran's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle but unmistakable shift in her demeanor that signaled the end of polite discourse and the beginning of official scrutiny. She made eye contact with Gus, the tow truck operator, who quickly lowered his tools, his face pale. He wanted no part of this. Linda sputtered, attempting to regain some semblance of her former composure, but the words caught in her throat. Financial misconduct? What are you talking about? This is ludicrous. I'm just enforcing the rules. Her voice was a pathetic squeak compared to her earlier bellows. The reality of the situation, the true gravity of her intrusion, was crashing down upon her with the force of a tidal wave. She had been so consumed by her petty grievances and absolute power that she had blindly charged into a federal operation. Ryan watched her, a grim satisfaction settling over him. He had known this day would come, that Linda Greaves' unchecked arrogance would eventually lead to her downfall. He just hadn't anticipated it would involve his undercover Jeep and a live-streamed confrontation. Officer Chen and Ramirez, now fully aware of the stakes, tightened their perimeter around the Jeep, their expressions stony. Officer Bowen stood a few paces behind Captain Tran, his gaze fixed on Linda, ensuring she wouldn't attempt any further foolishness. The rules you are enforcing, Mrs. Greaves, may well be part of a larger pattern of misuse of association funds. Captain Tran continued, her voice cutting through Linda's stammering. Our investigation has uncovered discrepancies in various HOA expenditures, including, but not limited to, inflated vendor contracts and questionable allocation of community improvement funds. Your recent actions, in attempting to silence a resident and seize property without due process, raised significant red flags. Tran's words were precise, each one landing like a carefully aimed dart, finding its mark. The information she was revealing, while cryptic to a layperson, sent a clear message the federal government was watching, and they knew more than Linda could ever imagine. The color drained from Linda's face. The mention of inflated vendor contracts and questionable allocation struck a chord. She had always prided herself on her cunning, her ability to manipulate the HOA's finances for her own benefit, disguising personal expenses as community improvements. But she had been so careful, so meticulous. How could they know the sudden realization that her carefully constructed world of deception was crumbling, that the very community she so fiercely protected was now her trap, was horrifying. The thought of her personal financial records, her discretionary funds, being scrutinized by federal agents, sent a cold sweat down her spine. This is, this is harassment, Linda finally managed to gasp, her voice barely a whisper. You have no proof. You can't just accuse people. On the contrary, Mrs. Greaves, Captain Tron replied, a hint of steel entering her voice. We have ample evidence, and your recent actions have only served to corroborate our suspicions. We have been monitoring certain activities within this HOA for some time. Detective Keller's presence here was part of a larger strategy to gather conclusive evidence. She gestured subtly toward Ryan, acknowledging his deep cover status. And now, thanks to your rather public display, we have an undeniable, real-time example of your modus operandi. Ryan felt a wave of relief wash over him. Captain Tran's strategic disclosure was a masterstroke. It not only exposed Linda's egregious behavior, but also painted a clear picture of the ongoing investigation, effectively neutralizing her immediate threat and buying them critical time. The attention now shifted from the ugly Jeep to Linda Greaves and her questionable reign. Linda's eyes darted nervously between Ryan and Captain Tran, then to the unblinking lens of Dan Harper's phone, which was still recording every agonizing second. Her reputation, her power, her carefully constructed image of community benevolence were all crumbling before her very eyes. Broadcast live to anyone with an internet connection, the thought of her carefully cultivated facade, her reign of terror over the neighborhood, being exposed for what it truly was, a petty, corrupt dictatorship, was a bitter pill. Furthermore, Mrs. Greaves, Captain Tran continued, pressing her advantage, the video evidence being collected by your neighbor, Mr. Harper, will serve as crucial documentation of your actions this morning. We appreciate your unwitting contribution to our case. She offered a small, almost imperceptible nod in Dan's direction. Dan, feeling a surge of vindication, gave a thumbs up, continuing to record with renewed vigor. His video, he realized, wasn't just local gossip, it was now federal evidence. The mention of the video seemed to deflate Linda entirely. Her shoulders slumped, and she looked utterly defeated. The reality of a federal investigation, coupled with public humiliation, was a crushing blow. The power she so desperately clung to had just been yanked from beneath her. Her reign was over. The game, it seemed, was well and truly up. Captain Tran turned to Gus, the tow truck operator. Sir, you are free to go. We appreciate your cooperation. Gus, visibly relieved, nodded vigorously and quickly began unhooking his equipment from Ryan's Jeep, eager to distance himself from the unfolding drama. The metallic clinks of the tow truck being prepared to depart were a jarringly normal sound in the now highly abnormal situation. Ryan watched Gus disengage the chains, a quiet sigh of relief escaping his lips. The Jeep was safe. The mission, though momentarily compromised by Linda's antics, was still on track. In fact, it had just received an unexpected boost. Linda Greaves, in her petty tyranny, had inadvertently handed them a powerful new avenue of investigation. Her actions this morning were not just an inconvenience, they were a confession. The silence that followed Captain Tran's surgical declaration was not merely a lack of sound, it was the chilling vacuum left by the sudden implosion of Linda Greaves' reality. The hum of Gus's tow truck, now rapidly fading down the street, was a mere whisper against the monumental collapse of Linda's carefully constructed world. Her bluster, once a roaring fire of indignation, had been reduced to ash, leaving behind only a ghastly pallor and a tremor that ran from her perfectly coiffed hair down to her trembling hands. Her expensive suit, tailored to project an image of power and control, suddenly seemed to sag, a cruel caricature of her deflated spirit. The imperious gleam in her eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a hollow, desperate stare that darted wildly, seeking an escape that no longer existed. Her kingdom, once the neatly trimmed lawns and uniform houses of Northwood Pines, now felt like a suffocating cage, its bars forged from her own petty tyranny and exposed corruption. Captain Tron, her face a mask of cold, professional resolve, wasted no time savoring the moment. Her gaze, sharp and analytical, swept from Linda to Ryan, then to her team. Detective Keller, secure the asset immediately. We will require a comprehensive assessment of its integrity and a full download of all the data logs. Officer Chen, Ramirez, Bowen, ensure the perimeter remains inviolable. Mrs. Greaves will be accompanying us to her residence for a preliminary interview. She is to be advised of her rights and is to have legal counsel present before any substantive questioning. She is not under arrest at this moment, but let it be unequivocally clear that her status is subject to immediate change based on the initial findings of our investigation. Her commands were delivered with a crisp, efficient precision, each word a hammer blow of bureaucratic authority, leaving no room for doubt, argument, or the slightest hint of sympathy. The jarring transition from a public spectacle to stringent official procedure was seamless, an unnerving display of federal power. Ryan nodded, a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. Understood, Captain. He glanced at Linda, who wouldn't meet his gaze, her eyes fixed on some indeterminate point beyond the perfectly green lawn. A profound wave of vindication washed over him, a potent mix of professional satisfaction and the quiet triumph of justice over unbridled arrogance. He knew this was merely the prelude to a far more extensive and punishing ordeal for Linda Greaves. But the immediate, critical threat to his mission had been not only neutralized, but also transformed into an unexpected tactical advantage. The path to justice, which had seemed fraught with clandestine complexity moments before, had just been paved wide open with the unyielding force of Linda Greaves' own spectacular self-destruction. He retrieved his keys, his movements deliberate and calm, a stark, controlled contrast to the earlier frantic energy that had permeated the suburban street. He began the methodical process of securing the Jeep, ensuring every piece of delicate equipment was accounted for and protected. Officer Chen, maintaining a respectful but firm distance, began to escort a visibly stunned Linda Greaves towards her sprawling, meticulously manicured house. Her usual brisk, confident stride, a hallmark of her self-appointed authority, had been reduced to a slow, pathetic shuffle, each step a testament to her utter defeat. Officer Ramirez and Officer Bowen remained steadfastly on the street, their presence a silent, authoritative reminder that the impromptu show was unequivocally over. They subtly, yet firmly, directed curious neighbors, who had been drawn out by the commotion, back into the privacy of their homes, their gazes unwavering. Their message clear: move along. Nothing more to see here. For now, the neighborhood, once a tableau of manufactured suburban quietude, was now indelibly etched with the lingering echoes of chaos, revelation, and the abrupt, brutal crash of a tyrant's reign. Dan Harper, the intrepid neighbor, felt a surge of exhilaration as he continued to record, his fingers steady on the smartphone screen. He captured Linda's ignominious retreat, her slumped shoulders and defeated posture, then shifted his focus, zooming in briefly on Captain Tron, who briefly acknowledged him with a curt, almost imperceptible nod before disappearing into Linda's house with Officer Chen. He knew, with absolute certainty, that his video, now filled with the dramatic sight of federal agents, the shocking revelation of a deep-cover operation, and damning accusations of financial fraud, was poised to explode across the internet. He didn't hesitate. Within minutes of the immediate confrontation winding down, he uploaded the raw footage to a popular video sharing platform, adding a provocative and instantly clickable title: HOA Karen cuts federal lock, exposes her own corruption. You won't believe what happens next. The response was instantaneous, overwhelming. Within hours, the video went viral, a digital wildfire igniting across social media platforms, news feeds, and online forums. It sparked a veritable firestorm of comments, shares, and unprecedented news coverage. Pundits debated it. Talk show hosts lampooned it. And countless Karens became viral memes overnight. It became a chilling, unforgettable cautionary tale of unchecked power, the insidious nature of petty tyranny, and the unforeseen, devastating consequences of operating outside the bounds of law and common sense. Dan Harper, the unlikely chronicler, found himself a minor internet celebrity, his footage serving as irrefutable public evidence. The subsequent federal investigation into the Northwood Pines Homeowners Association was swift, brutal, and meticulously thorough. Armed with the voluminous intelligence gathered from Ryan's covert operation, months of patient surveillance, decrypted communications, and meticulously cross-referenced financial ledgers, and bolstered by Linda Greaves's highly public, televised tantrum in Dan Harper's globally viral video, the task force moved with ruthless efficiency. They systematically dismantled the intricate, opaque web of financial fraud that Linda and her co-conspirators had so carefully spun. Linda Greaves, once the undisputed, self-anointed queen of the HOA, found herself metaphorically stripped naked, her authority evaporated, and facing a devastating barrage of federal charges, obstruction of justice, multiple counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and a litany of other financial malfeasance charges. Her meticulously hidden financial misdeeds, which had allowed her to siphon off hundreds of thousands of dollars in community funds for her own personal luxuries, lavish trips, designer clothes, and even the renovation of her already opulent kitchen, all disguised as community improvements, were brought to light in excruciating, humiliating detail during her public trial. Cornered by irrefutable evidence, she eventually pleaded guilty to several counts in a desperate attempt to avoid a longer sentence, ultimately receiving a significant prison sentence and a hefty fine, a stark, undeniable reminder that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law, regardless of their self-proclaimed authority or their position within a local community. The homeowners of Northwood Pines, initially reeling from the profound shock and betrayal of the revelations, rallied together with an astonishing display of unity and resilience. They swiftly initiated a recall election, ousting the remaining corrupt board members who had either knowingly or negligently enabled Linda's reign. They then held new, transparent elections, instituting stringent financial oversight measures and implementing robust ethical guidelines designed to prevent any future abuses of power. The community, though undeniably bruised and disillusioned by the scandal, emerged from the ashes stronger, more united, and fundamentally more democratic. Finally free from the autocratic, iron grip of Linda Greaves, they learned a hard lesson about vigilance and accountability. Detective Ryan Keller, his complex and challenging mission, a resounding success, eventually packed up his temporary suburban life. The rugged Jeep, its crucial role accomplished, was returned to its secure federal facility, stripped of its covert enhancements, and returned to a generic fleet vehicle. Ryan had not only successfully dismantled a powerful financial crime syndicate, but had also, quite unexpectedly, brought down a suburban dictator. His unwavering dedication, his sharp tactical mind, and his remarkable composure under immense, unforeseen pressure had not only secured multiple convictions but had also, perhaps more importantly, restored integrity and faith to a community that had unknowingly been living under a pervasive cloud of corruption and deceit. He was lauded by his superiors for his exceptional discretion, his unwavering perseverance, and his remarkable ability to adapt to the most unpredictable challenges, including, ironically, the most unexpectedly dangerous one, an HOA president with an unshakable belief in her own absolute power and a penchant for extreme, ill-advised enforcement. As Ryan drove away from Elmwood Lane for the very last time, the neat rows of houses bathed in the soft, golden glow of a setting sun, he couldn't help but allow a quiet, knowing smile to spread across his face. The suburban dream, which for too long had served as a carefully constructed facade for deceit and illicit gains, was now, finally, on a true path to genuine transparency and authentic community spirit. And it all, remarkably, had begun with a seemingly innocuous Jeep, a tyrannical HOA president armed with a clipboard, and a woman who truly believed she held the power to tow anything that displeased her. The indelible image of Linda Greaves, her face a mask of utter disbelief and dawning horror as Captain Tran delivered the unvarnished truth, remained vividly etched in his mind, a powerful, unforgettable testament to the profound truth that even the smallest, seemingly insignificant acts of defiance can ultimately unravel the largest, most carefully woven webs of deceit. The quiet suburbs had roared, not with the sound of a tow truck, but with the resounding triumph of justice, and in its own dramatic, unforgettable way, had prevailed. The saga of the HOA Karen became more than just a viral video. It transformed into a local legend, a potent, enduring reminder that true power isn't about control or dominion over others, but about unwavering accountability, humble transparency, and an abiding respect for the immutable rule of law. What an intense journey. We witnessed Detective Ryan Keller's mission nearly derailed by Linda Greaves' audacious power grab, only for justice to prevail in the most unexpected way. It's a stark reminder that even in the quietest neighborhoods, power can corrupt. Thank you for watching this thrilling saga unfold. If you were on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping stories.